My name's Samuel. I was 28 when I moved into that townhouse just outside Seattle with my girlfriend Emily. We'd been together for a couple of years, and this was our first place together. A modest two-bedroom with a single attached garage that felt like a little slice of independence. Everything seemed perfect at first. The kind of neighborhood where you'd expect friendly waves and quiet nights. But it didn't take long before the cracks showed. Right next door lived Chad. Chad was the kind of guy you instantly noticed, not because he wanted to blend in, but because he made sure you couldn't ignore him. Mid-30s, noticeably short, with a buzz cut that looked like a failed attempt to hide a receding hairline. And he had this massive lifted pickup truck that was so tall it never fit in his garage. Alongside it, a souped-up Honda Civic that roared down the street more times than I cared to count. The first few days, Chad acted like a friendly neighbor. When our movers arrived, he shifted his vehicles around to help, or so it seemed. He mentioned how the previous tenants let him use their garage during winter for his motorcycle project. I told him I didn't have the key or access code yet, and that the landlord hadn't given me permission to share it. That's when I got the warning. The landlord said bluntly, "Don't give Chad the garage code. The last tenants got robbed after Christmas, and while there's no proof, I suspect Chad and his friends." Locks were changed, codes reset. The landlord made it clear, no sharing with Chad. From that moment, things got worse. Chad's friendly facade crumbled quickly. He started pressuring me daily for access. When I refused, his temper snapped. I remember one evening when he almost lunged at me, only held back by his buddies. That was the start of it all. The empty beer cans tossed onto my lawn, the whistles and catcalls directed at Emily when she was alone, the music blaring at odd hours, and the truck blocking my driveway. Winter was brutal. Parking restrictions meant Chad couldn't use the street or the visitor lot. His prized Civic got vandalized, scratched paint, ripped car cover, and he blamed me. When I found my Christmas decorations torn to shreds in the yard, I knew I couldn't just take it anymore. That cold night, I grabbed the garden hose. Every half hour, from 10 p.m. till dawn, I soaked his Civic with water. By morning, the car was frozen solid, iced over, and stuck fast in his driveway. Chad's meltdown was epic. Screaming, banging, police and fire trucks showed up. Nothing worked. His friends tried to free the car with power tools, but only made things worse, cutting into the fender and tires. By spring, my contract ended. I packed up, finally leaving the nightmare behind. Looking back, I realized that fight for peace wasn't just about freezing a car. It was about standing up for myself, my home, and the life Emily and I were building. Moving out of that townhouse felt like breaking free from a cage I hadn't realized I was trapped in. For months, Chad's constant harassment had worn down my nerves. Every day was a careful dance, watching what I said, where I went, how I parked. Emily felt it too. The joy of a new home was buried beneath the shadow of a neighbor who made life miserable. Our new apartment downtown was nothing fancy, but it was ours. The city buzzed around us, yet inside our walls, there was something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. As we unpacked, the silence was a balm. Boxes opened, photos hung, and the hum of normal life began to drown out memories of shouting and smashed decorations. One evening, while sipping coffee on our tiny balcony overlooking the city lights, my phone buzzed. It was Mark, my old landlord. "Samuel, you won't believe this. Chad and his crew got busted. Convenience store robbery, right after the holidays. Karma's a bitch, huh?" I stared at the message, an odd mixture of relief and residual anger swirling inside me. It wasn't joy in someone else's downfall, but a quiet acknowledgement that the nightmare was finally over. I shared the news with Emily that night. "Sounds like justice, finally," she said, her voice calm but tinged with the exhaustion we both carried. "I guess," I replied. "But more than that, it's a reminder how far we had to go just to feel safe again." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "We made it through, together." Her words anchored me. Those months had changed something inside me. I realized that standing firm wasn't just about confrontation. It was about reclaiming my home, my peace, and protecting the life we were building. Still, the scars lingered. Sometimes I'd catch myself flinching at a sudden noise or feeling uneasy if a stranger loitered near the building. The trauma of constant stress doesn't just vanish. It folds into your memory, a shadow you carry even when the storm passes. Work helped. I threw myself into my photography projects, traveling occasionally, focusing on capturing moments of calm and beauty. Emily and I grew closer, finding strength in each other. But every so often, the past whispered back. One afternoon, as I edited photos in my studio, my phone buzzed again. A news alert popped up. Local man and associates arrested for multiple charges, including burglary and drug possession. Chad's name was there, a stark headline that made my chest tighten. I felt conflicted. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated, but another part wondered how someone could spiral so far. Did Chad ever imagine the damage he caused? Was there a moment where he wished he'd chosen differently? That evening, Emily and I sat in silence. People like him, I said slowly. They're more complicated than just bad neighbor. But that doesn't excuse what they do. She nodded, squeezing my hand. And we get to choose who we let into our lives, who we let affect us. It was a lesson hard-earned. The quiet after the storm wasn't just about peace. It was about resilience, growth, and knowing that while you can't control others, you can always control your response. And with Emily by my side, I knew I was ready for whatever came next. The quiet that settled over my life after moving away from that nightmare of a neighbor wasn't just a relief. It was a chance to rebuild, to breathe, and to confront the parts of myself I'd been too distracted to see before. For weeks after the news about Chad's arrest, I found myself wrestling with unexpected feelings. Part satisfaction, sure, but beneath that, a tangled web of guilt, anger, and even sympathy. How had things spiraled so far? How had I let someone else's toxicity seep into my sense of safety and worth? One night, alone in my studio, editing a series of portraits I'd shot the day before, I caught myself staring blankly at the screen. The faces in the photos, each unique, each carrying stories of their own, reminded me how fragile life could be. I thought about Emily, about our dreams for the future, and about the invisible battles people fought every day. Despite the calm, I wasn't immune. The years of stress had left marks. There were nights when my heart raced at the slightest sound outside our apartment. Sometimes in crowded rooms, I'd feel a sudden wave of anxiety, a flashback of the constant hostility I'd endured. I kept these feelings locked tight, afraid to burden Emily or appear weak. One afternoon, Emily found me staring out the window, lost in thought. She didn't say anything at first, but later that evening, over dinner, she broke the silence. "Sam, you've changed. I can see it. In the way you carry yourself, in your silences. You don't have to carry this alone." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I realized I'd been fighting an internal war no one else saw. I'd been so focused on defending my home and us from the outside chaos that I'd neglected the turmoil inside. That night, I finally opened up. "I'm scared sometimes," I admitted quietly. Not about Chad anymore, about what that time did to me, about feeling safe again. Emily reached across the table, taking my hand. "It's okay to be scared. It doesn't make you less strong. It means you're human." Her understanding felt like a balm, soothing old wounds that had long festered beneath the surface. Together, we decided to seek help. Therapy wasn't a sign of weakness, it was a tool for healing. Through sessions, I learned to untangle the knots of anxiety and trauma. I discovered how deeply the constant fear had affected my trust in people, my ability to relax, even my creativity. But slowly, I began to reclaim parts of myself I thought were lost. One breakthrough came during a session where I revisited the idea of boundaries. "I always thought standing up to Chad was about making him stop," I said. "But maybe it was about making myself heard, about refusing to be invisible." My therapist nodded. And that's a powerful realization. Setting boundaries is how we protect our sense of self. It's not just about others, it's about honoring who you are. Back at home, Emily and I started new rituals: morning walks, weekend hikes, quiet dinners without screens. We built a sanctuary, a place where peace wasn't fragile, but rooted. Work, too, took on new meaning. I approached my photography not just as a job, but as a way to capture resilience, the quiet strength in everyday moments, the beauty in brokenness, the hope in healing. Still, the past wasn't entirely behind me. Sometimes the sound of a revving engine or a harsh shout in the distance would tighten my chest. But now I had tools to face those moments, a calm breath, a reminder of where I was, who I was with. And most importantly, I had Emily, a constant reminder that love and understanding can rebuild even the most battered spirit. As spring turned to summer, I felt something shift deep inside, a quiet confidence that, while life might throw storms my way, I had the strength to weather them. Just as Emily and I started to feel settled in our new life, something unexpected happened. A text popped up on my phone one chilly autumn evening from Mark, my old landlord. "Hey Sam, just wanted to give you a heads up. Heard Chad's out on bail. Court date's coming up soon." I stared at the screen, heart sinking. The news hit me harder than I expected. For months, I'd thought that chapter was closed, that the nightmare had ended with the ice on his car and his arrest. But here it was again, the past creeping back like an unwelcome shadow. I told Emily as soon as I got home. "He's out? After everything?" she asked, her voice low but tense. "Yeah," I said. "Court's in a few weeks. I'm not sure what to expect." The thought of seeing Chad again, or even just knowing he was back in the neighborhood, prowling around with that same reckless attitude, stirred up a mix of dread and unresolved anger inside me. In the days that followed, old anxieties returned. I found myself double-checking locks, jumping at noises, and replaying every confrontation in my mind. I realized that moving on wasn't just about leaving physically. It was about confronting what lingered inside. One afternoon, while working on a client shoot, I caught myself zoning out, distracted by a loud engine nearby. The sound echoed like a trigger, pulling me back into memories I didn't want to relive. That evening, Emily and I sat down to talk. "I'm scared this will never really end," I confessed. "That no matter what I do, this shadow will follow me." She reached out, her eyes steady and kind. "Sam, it's okay to be scared, but you don't have to face it alone. We've come too far to let fear control us." Her words reminded me of the strength we'd built together, the resilience born from hardship. As the court date approached, I debated whether to attend. Part of me wanted to show up, to face Chad and reclaim control. Another part feared reopening wounds I'd worked so hard to heal. In the end, I chose to go. The courtroom was tense. Chad looked older, harder, but still the same man who'd made my life miserable. Hearing the details of his charges and his own desperate justifications stirred a mix of emotions: anger, pity, and a strange sense of closure. After the hearing, I felt lighter, as if seeing him in that setting finally put a full stop on the chapter. But the real victory wasn't in justice served, it was in my own growth. I'd faced my fear, I'd stood my ground, and I'd come out stronger. Walking out of the courthouse with Emily by my side, I felt a quiet peace settle in my chest. Not the absence of fear, but the presence of courage. After the courthouse day, life began to feel different. Not because the past had vanished, that's impossible, but because I'd finally claimed my power over it. I realized something important. Moving on wasn't about forgetting what happened or pretending it never left a mark. It was about accepting the scars, learning from them, and choosing what comes next. Emily and I settled deeper into our routines. Our home became more than just a place to live. It became a sanctuary where we nurtured hope and healing. We started volunteering at a local community center, helping others facing tough times, and that gave us a new perspective. One afternoon, as I reviewed photos from a recent project, Emily surprised me with a small, thoughtful gift: a journal. "For your thoughts, your plans, whatever you want," she said softly. "Sometimes putting it down on paper helps." At first I hesitated. Writing wasn't my usual outlet, but soon I found myself jotting down not only memories, but dreams. Things I wanted to achieve beyond just surviving. Through journaling, I confronted hidden fears that had lurked beneath the surface for years. Fears of failure, of not being enough, of losing control. I started writing about my childhood, my hopes for the future, and the man I wanted to become. One entry stood out. I am not defined by what others do to me. I am defined by how I respond. Today, I choose strength over fear. The act of writing gave me clarity and helped me see my journey not as a series of setbacks, but as a path of resilience. At work, I began taking on more challenging projects. Photography was no longer just a way to make a living. It became a way to tell stories of hope and recovery. Clients responded to the authenticity I brought to my work, and that gave me renewed confidence. But rebuilding trust wasn't just about me. It was about reconnecting with people I'd pulled away from during those difficult months. Friends who had reached out but were met with my guarded silence. Family members who wanted to support me but didn't know how. Slowly, I started opening up, sharing pieces of my experience without the walls I'd built. Vulnerability became a new kind of strength. One evening, after a long day, Emily and I sat by the fireplace. I looked at her, grateful for her unwavering support. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for being my anchor." She smiled, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "We're in this together. Always." The future wasn't without uncertainty. Challenges would come. But with each day I felt more ready, more capable of facing whatever storms lay ahead. Because now I understood that true strength isn't the absence of fear, it's moving forward despite it. The months that followed brought a sense of momentum I hadn't felt in years. Emily and I were carving out a life filled with purpose, creativity, and connection. My photography projects were flourishing, and the community work gave me a sense of giving back, a way to turn pain into something meaningful. But even as we built this new chapter, the echoes of the past weren't completely silent. Shadows lingered in quiet moments. A sudden loud noise, a glance from a stranger, or the haunting memory of that cold winter night. Those reminders were subtle but persistent, like footprints in the snow long after the storm had passed. One evening, as I packed gear for a weekend shoot in the mountains, Emily looked at me with a seriousness I hadn't seen in a while. "Sam, have you thought about what you want next? Not just work or us? What about you? Your dreams?" Her question struck me. I'd been so focused on healing and surviving that I hadn't really paused to dream again. What did I want, beyond just getting by? That night, alone in my studio, I sat down with my journal and started writing, really writing, about the future I wanted. About goals I'd buried, fears I still carried, and the man I aspired to be. It wasn't easy. Doubts crept in. What if I wasn't good enough? What if the past came back to haunt me? But I kept writing, each word a step toward reclaiming my narrative. At the same time, new challenges surfaced. A close friend reached out, revealing that he was struggling with addiction and needed support. Another client canceled a major project last minute, threatening my financial stability. And just when I thought I'd left drama behind, a chance encounter with someone connected to Chad stirred old tensions I thought I'd long buried. Navigating these storms tested everything I'd learned. There were moments when the weight felt unbearable. Nights when the anxiety whispered that I'd never truly be free. But Emily's presence was a constant reminder that I wasn't alone. We leaned on each other, sharing fears and hopes, laughing and crying together. One afternoon, after helping my friend find a support group, I reflected on how far I'd come. From a terrified neighbor trapped in a battle with Chad, to someone facing life's unpredictability head-on. The journey wasn't about perfection or victory. It was about resilience, love, and the courage to keep moving forward. And so, with my camera in hand and Emily by my side, I stepped into the unknown, ready for whatever came next. It had been nearly a year since Chad's arrest. Almost a full cycle of seasons had passed since that bitter winter frozen moment on his driveway. Life, as unpredictable as ever, had finally begun to smooth out its rough edges for Emily and me. The echoes of chaos no longer dominated our days. Instead, a calm resilience settled over us like a well-worn quilt, comforting and familiar. That summer, I found myself standing in a bright, airy gallery space filled with my work. Photographs that told stories not just of places, but of people. Their struggles, their triumphs, their quiet moments of grace. The exhibit was a collection of portraits from friends, strangers, and people I'd met through volunteering. Each frame a testament to endurance and hope. As the room filled with guests, familiar faces from my life and new ones drawn in by the stories behind the images, I felt a swell of gratitude. This was more than a show. It was a celebration of survival, of growth, and of the unexpected beauty found in healing. Emily stood beside me, radiant as ever, her hand gently resting on my arm. "You've come so far, Sam," she whispered, her eyes shining with pride and love. I smiled, feeling the weight of that journey. Every late night wrestling with anxiety, every moment of doubt, every small victory, all culminating here. Later that evening, after the last visitor had left and the lights dimmed, I stayed behind in the quiet. Alone in the gallery, I let my thoughts drift back to that cold winter night when I'd spent hours spraying Chad's car with water, locking it in ice. It had been an act born from desperation and frustration, a way to fight back when everything felt out of control. But peace, I realized, wasn't something you could force or freeze. It was something you built, brick by brick, day by day, through forgiveness, patience, and the courage to keep moving forward despite fear. I thought about Chad too, the man who had cast such a long shadow over my life. I didn't hate him anymore. That hatred would only chain me to the past. Instead, I felt a complicated mix of pity and resolve. Everyone carries their burdens, and sometimes the weight crushes more than just the person holding it. As I walked out into the night air, the city humming softly around me, I felt a deep sense of closure. Not because every question had been answered or every wound healed, but because I had reclaimed my story. Emily was waiting outside, her face lit by the glow of the street lamps. "Ready to go home?" she asked. I nodded, slipping my hand into hers. The future stretched ahead, unknown, unwritten, but full of promise. Because this wasn't the end. It was a new beginning. Thank you for sharing this journey with me. If you enjoyed Samuel's story, there are many more waiting to be told. Until next time, take care of yourself and remember, strength isn't about never falling, but about rising every time you do. See you in the next story.